It was a warm summer afternoon, the kind where the air hums with cicadas and kids laugh in the distance, their voices carrying over picket fences. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, 12-year-old Aaliyah Thompson was playing in her backyard, her favorite purple sneakers kicking up dirt as she chased a butterfly. Her mom, Denise, watched from the kitchen window, stirring a pitcher of lemonade, smiling at how her daughter's braids bounced with every step. It was one of those moments you think will last forever, until it doesn't. Denise turned away for just a minute, maybe two, to answer a phone call. When she looked back, Aaliyah was gone. The backyard was empty, the butterfly net lying abandoned in the grass. Panic set in, sharp and cold, as Denise ran outside, calling her daughter's name. The neighbors came out, the police were called, and soon the whole town was searching. But Aaliyah had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a hole in her family's heart that would grow deeper with every passing year. For 12 years, Denise held on to hope, even when everyone else told her to let go. She kept Aaliyah's room exactly the same, her posters of Beyoncé still taped to the wall, her favorite stuffed bear on the bed. Every night, Denise prayed for a sign, anything to bring her little girl back. Her husband, Marcus, was her rock at first, holding her through the sleepless nights, promising they'd find their daughter. But as the years dragged on, Marcus grew distant, his eyes shadowed with something Denise couldn't quite place. She chalked it up to grief. After all, they'd both lost so much. The town moved on, the headlines faded, but Denise never stopped searching. She followed every lead, no matter how small, clinging to the belief that Aaliyah was out there, somewhere. Then, one rainy morning, 12 years after that awful day, Denise found something that turned her world upside down. While looking for a razor in Marcus's shaving kit, her fingers brushed against something cold and unfamiliar. She pulled it out, a small, tarnished locket, one she hadn't seen in years. It was Aaliyah's, the one she'd been wearing the day she disappeared. Her heart stopped. Why was it here? How had Marcus gotten it? And what else was he hiding? Meanwhile, across town another story was unfolding, one that seemed worlds apart but was tied to Aaliyah's in ways no one could have imagined. Jaden, a black teenager with a quiet smile and a heart bigger than most, was riding the bus home from school. The bus was crowded, the air thick with chatter and the hum of the engine. A pregnant white woman stepped on, struggling to balance as the bus lurched forward. Without a second thought, Jaden stood up and offered her a seat. She looked at him, surprised, then grateful, and sat down with a tired sigh. As she settled in, she reached into her bag, scribbled something on a piece of paper, and handed it to Jaden. "Read this later," she said softly, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. Jaden nodded, tucking the note into his pocket, not thinking much of it until he got home. When he unfolded the paper, his breath caught. The words written there were about to change his life forever, pulling him into a mystery that stretched back over a decade, one that would lead him straight to the truth about Aaliyah's disappearance. What did that note say? How was it connected to the locket in Marcus's shaving kit? And what secrets had been buried in that quiet suburban neighborhood for 12 long years? Denise's discovery was only the beginning, a crack in the surface of a truth so deep and twisted it would shake her to her core. Jaden, with his kind heart and that mysterious note, was now caught in the same web, his simple act of kindness setting off a chain of events that would unravel everything. Two stories, one born of loss and desperation, the other of compassion and chance, were about to collide in ways no one could predict. Stick with us as we dive into this gripping tale of love, betrayal, and the search for answers, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Denise's hands trembled as she held the locket, its familiar weight both a comfort and a knife to her heart. The small, heart-shaped pendant was scratched and dulled by time, but she'd recognize it anywhere. Aaliyah had begged for it at a flea market when she was 8, her eyes wide with excitement over the tiny purple stone embedded in the center. Denise had laughed, handing over the $5, thinking it was just a cheap trinket. But Aaliyah wore it every day, even to bed, saying it made her feel like a princess. Now, here it was, hidden in Marcus's shaving kit, a secret he'd kept for who knows how long. Denise's mind raced, questions piling up like storm clouds. Had he found it somewhere? Had he known where Aaliyah was all this time? Or worse, had he been involved? She shoved the thought away, her stomach twisting. Marcus, her high school sweetheart, the man who'd cried with her when Aaliyah vanished, wouldn't do that. He couldn't. But as she stood in their bathroom, the locket cold against her palm, doubt crept in like a shadow. She sank onto the edge of the bathtub, clutching the locket tighter. The house was quiet, Marcus still at work, giving her time to think. She tried to piece together the last 12 years, searching for clues she might have missed. They'd moved to this town when Aaliyah was 3, drawn by the promise of a safe, family-friendly neighborhood with good schools and friendly neighbors. Marcus had just gotten a job as a mechanic at a local garage, and Denise worked part-time at a daycare, always making sure she was home when Aaliyah got off the school bus. Life had been good, simple until that summer day. The police had combed the backyard, the woods nearby, even the creek that ran behind the neighborhood. They'd questioned everyone, neighbors, delivery drivers, even the ice cream truck driver who came by every weekend. Nothing. No witnesses, no evidence. Just an empty backyard and a mother's broken heart. Denise had thrown herself into the search, putting up flyers, talking to reporters, even starting a blog to keep Aaliyah's name out there. Marcus had been by her side at first, but over time, he'd pulled back, saying it was too hard, that they needed to move on. She'd resented him for it, but she never suspected he was hiding something like this. Downstairs, the front door creaked open, and Denise's heart jumped. She stuffed the locket into her pocket and hurried to the mirror, splashing cold water on her face to hide the tears. Marcus's heavy footsteps echoed through the house, followed by the familiar jingle of his keys hitting the kitchen counter. "Denise? You home?" he called, his voice tired but warm. She took a deep breath, forcing a smile as she walked downstairs. He was at the fridge, grabbing a beer, his work shirt stained with grease. He looked the same as always, broad shoulders, kind eyes, a little gray creeping into his beard. But now, those familiar features felt like a mask. "Long day?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He nodded, cracking open the can. "Yeah, same old. You okay? You look off." Her pulse quickened. Did he know she'd found it? She shrugged, mumbling something about a headache, and changed the subject. But as they sat through dinner, her eyes kept drifting to him, searching for a sign, a slip, anything that might explain the locket. He ate quietly, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her. Across town, Jaden was sprawled on his bed, the note from the bus still crumpled in his hand. He'd read it a dozen times, but the words still didn't make sense. "Meet me at the old oak tree by Miller's Creek tomorrow at 6 p.m. I know something about Aaliyah Thompson. Don't tell anyone." No signature, no explanation, just those 3 sentences in neat, hurried handwriting. Jaden's heart thudded as he read it again. Aaliyah Thompson. Everyone in town knew that name. Her face had been on every news channel, every missing person poster, for years after she disappeared. Jaden had been just a kid himself back then, but he remembered his mom talking about it, how the whole community had rallied to search for her. Now, here was this note, pulling him into something he didn't understand. He thought about the woman on the bus, her tired eyes, the way her hand shook slightly as she handed him the paper. She hadn't looked like someone playing a prank. She'd looked scared. Jaden sat up, running a hand over his short curls. He was 16, a junior in high school, the kind of kid who kept his head down and stayed out of trouble. He wasn't a hero, not like in the movies. He helped his mom with groceries, played basketball with his friends, and dreamed of getting a scholarship to college. But that note felt like a weight in his pocket, like it was asking him to be something more. He thought about telling his mom, but the note said not to tell anyone, and something in his gut told him to listen. He grabbed his phone and searched Aaliyah's name, scrolling through old articles and posts on X. Most of them were from years ago, updates on the search, pleas from Denise, theories from strangers. But one recent post caught his eye, something about a new lead in the case, though it was vague, just speculation. Could the woman on the bus know something real? And why had she chosen him? Back at the Thompson house, Denise couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, Marcus snoring softly beside her, the locket hidden under her pillow. She'd wanted to confront him at dinner, to slam the locket on the table and demand answers, but fear had stopped her. What if he had an explanation? What if he didn't? She couldn't bear the thought of losing him too, not after everything. But the locket was proof of something he hadn't told her. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and tiptoed to the living room. The house was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. She pulled out her phone and opened her old blog, scrolling through years of posts about Aaliyah. She'd stopped writing a couple of years ago, when the comments turned cruel, people telling her to give up, that Aaliyah was gone for good. But now, with the locket burning a hole in her thoughts, she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with dread. She started typing, her fingers moving fast, pouring out everything. The locket, Marcus, the questions she couldn't answer. She didn't know if anyone would read it, but it felt like a lifeline, a way to make sense of the chaos in her head. As she wrote, memories flooded back, little things she hadn't thought about in years. Like how Marcus had started working late right after Aaliyah disappeared, saying the garage was short-staffed. Or how he'd gotten quiet when the police asked about his whereabouts that day, brushing it off as a long shift. She'd never questioned it, too consumed by her own grief. But now, those moments felt like puzzle pieces, jagged and sharp, refusing to fit together. She hit publish and stared at the screen, her heart pounding. What if someone out there knew something? What if the locket wasn't the only secret? The next morning, Jaden woke up with the note still on his mind. He stuffed it into his backpack and headed to school, his thoughts a jumble of nerves and curiosity. The day dragged on, his teachers' voices fading into the background as he replayed the note's words. I know something about Aaliyah Thompson. What could she know? And why him? He wasn't anyone special, just a kid who'd given up his seat. By the time the final bell rang, he'd made up his mind. He'd go to Miller's Creek, meet the woman, and hear her out. He told his best friend, Malik, he was skipping basketball practice, ignoring the raised eyebrow Malik gave him. You good, man? Malik asked, tossing a ball between his hands. Jaden nodded, forcing a grin. Yeah, just got something to do. He didn't mention the note.
He couldn't not yet.
Miller's Creek was a quiet spot on the edge of town, a narrow stream lined with tall grass and a single, massive oak tree that everyone used as a landmark. Jaden got there early, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. He sat on a rock, fidgeting with his phone, checking the time every few minutes. At exactly 6 p.m., he heard footsteps crunching through the grass. The woman from the bus appeared, her face pale and drawn, her hands stuffed into the pockets of her coat. She looked older up close, maybe in her 40s, with faint lines around her eyes and a nervous energy that made Jaden's stomach tighten. You came, she said, her voice low, like she was afraid someone might hear. I wasn't sure you would. Jaden stood, his heart racing. What's this about? The note. You said you know something about Aaliyah Thompson. She glanced around, her eyes darting to the trees, the road, the empty path. I do, she whispered, but it's not safe to talk here. Not yet. Denise spent the day in a fog, the locket now tucked into her purse, out of Marcus's reach. She'd checked his shaving kit again that morning, half expecting to find something else, but it was just the usual: razors, shaving cream, a comb. She didn't know what she'd hoped for, another clue? Maybe, or proof that the locket was a fluke. But there was nothing, and that only made her more uneasy. She called in sick to work, unable to focus, and drove to the library, where she could use the public computers without Marcus knowing. She searched his name, their address, anything that might connect to Aaliyah's case. Most of it was old news, articles about the search, interviews with her and Marcus, grainy photos of their family before it all fell apart. But one article mentioned a witness, a neighbor who'd seen an unfamiliar car parked near their house the day Aaliyah vanished. The police had followed up, but the lead went nowhere. Denise frowned, trying to remember who'd lived next door back then. The house had changed hands a few times since, but she made a note to check the old neighborhood records. That evening, Jaden sat at the dinner table, barely touching his food. His mom, a nurse who always seemed to know when something was wrong, gave him a long look. "What's going on with you, Jaden? You've been quiet all day." He shrugged, pushing his peas around his plate. "Just tired, Mom." He wanted to tell her about the woman, the note, the meeting at the creek, but the woman's warning echoed in his head. Not safe to talk. He didn't know what that meant, but it scared him. After dinner, he slipped back to his room and pulled out the note again, rereading it like it might reveal something new. The woman had promised to contact him again, said she'd explain everything soon, but only if he kept quiet. Jaden didn't like it, but he felt like he was in too deep to back out now. He thought about Aaliyah, about her mom, about the pain they must have gone through. If he could help, even a little, wasn't that worth it? Denise, meanwhile, was digging deeper. She'd found an old box of photos in the attic, ones from before Aaliyah disappeared. She spread them out on the kitchen table, her eyes scanning every detail. There was one of Aaliyah and Marcus at a school picnic, Aaliyah grinning with a gap-toothed smile, Marcus ruffling her hair. Denise's chest ached at the memory, but she forced herself to focus. In the background, barely noticeable, was a car, a dark sedan, parked across the street. It looked out of place, not like the minivans and SUVs that fill their neighborhood. She grabbed her phone and zoomed in, her heart racing. Was this the car the neighbor had mentioned? She didn't know, but it was something. She needed to talk to someone, anyone who might remember. She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? That she'd found her daughter's locket in her husband's things? That she didn't trust him anymore? The thought made her sick. As the days passed, both Denise and Jaden were pulled deeper into the mystery. Denise started following Marcus, quietly noting his routines, where he went after work, who he talked to. She hated herself for it, but the locket had shattered her trust. Jaden, meanwhile, waited for another message from the woman, checking his phone obsessively, jumping at every notification. The woman had told him to wait, to be patient, but the waiting was driving him crazy. He started asking around, casually, about Aaliyah's case, hoping someone at school or in the neighborhood might know something. Most people just shook their heads, saying it was a tragedy, that the case was cold. But one day, his history teacher, Mr. Carter, mentioned something odd. There was a guy who used to work at the garage with Aaliyah's dad. Left town right after she disappeared. Always thought that was weird. Jaden's ears perked up, but he didn't push it. He didn't want to draw attention. Not yet. The threads of their stories were weaving together, though neither knew it. Denise's blog post had gotten more attention than she expected, with comments pouring in, some supportive, others cruel, but a few hinting at things she hadn't considered. One anonymous commenter wrote, "Check the garage. You'd be surprised what gets buried there." It was vague, probably nothing, but it stuck with her. Jaden, meanwhile, got a new message from the woman. A text this time, from a blocked number. "Meet me at the library, tomorrow, 7 p.m. Come alone." His hands shook as he read it, the weight of it all pressing down on him. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he couldn't turn back now. And Denise, clutching the locket as she drove to the old neighborhood, was about to uncover something that would change everything. The truth was out there, closer than either of them realized, but it was wrapped in secrets, lies, and a danger neither was prepared for. What would they find? And what would it cost them to keep going? Denise gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles pale, as she pulled into the old neighborhood. The houses looked the same. White fences, neatly trimmed lawns, but the air felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of all those unanswered questions. The locket sat in her purse, a constant reminder of the wedge between her and Marcus. She'd spent the last few days watching him, noting how he lingered at the garage after work, how he'd started locking his phone, something he'd never done before. She told herself she was being paranoid, that grief was twisting her thoughts, but that anonymous comment on her blog, "Check the garage," kept echoing in her head. She parked a block away from their old house, now occupied by a young family, and walked toward the community board where people still posted flyers for lost pets and yard sales. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but the car in that old photo haunted her. It was a dark sedan, nothing special, but it didn't belong. She scanned the street, half expecting to see it parked somewhere, as if 12 years hadn't passed. Her phone buzzed, a notification from her blog. Another comment. You're getting close. Be careful. Her stomach dropped. Who was watching her? And why did it feel like they knew more than she did? Across town, Jaden stood outside the library, his breath visible in the chilly evening air. The text from the mysterious woman had kept him up all night, his mind spinning with possibilities. He'd almost told his mom, but her worried eyes at dinner stopped him. She had enough on her plate, working double shifts, saving for his college. He didn't want to drag her into this, whatever this was. The library's glass doors reflected the streetlights, and Jaden checked his phone again. 6:58 p.m. He shoved his hands in his pockets. The note crumpled inside, its words burned into his memory. I know something about Aaliyah Thompson. He didn't know why this woman trusted him, a random kid who'd just given up his seat on a bus, but her urgency made him feel like he was part of something bigger. The door creaked open, and there she was, the woman from the bus, her coat pulled tight, her eyes scanning the parking lot like she expected someone to jump out. Jaden, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for coming. He nodded, his throat tight. What's this about? You said you know something about Aaliyah. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. I do, but it's complicated, and it's dangerous. Back at the old neighborhood, Denise slipped into the community center, a small building where the search for Aaliyah had been coordinated years ago. She'd come here countless times back then, pinning up flyers, begging for volunteers. Now it was quiet, the bulletin board covered with faded notices. She scanned them, her fingers brushing over a flyer for a missing cat, until she found something tucked behind it, a crumpled piece of paper, yellowed with age. It was a receipt from the garage where Marcus worked, dated the week Aaliyah disappeared. Her heart raced as she read it. An oil change for a dark sedan, paid in cash, no name listed. It could be nothing, she told herself. Lots of people drove sedans. But the coincidence gnawed her. She remembered Marcus's late nights at the garage, how he'd come home smelling of oil and something else, something sharp like fear. She stuffed the receipt into her purse and stepped outside, the night air cold against her skin. As she walked back to her car, she noticed a man watching her from across the street, his face half hidden by a hoodie. When she looked again, he was gone. At the library, the woman led Jaden to a quiet corner, away from the few late-night studiers. She introduced herself as Claire, her voice low and shaky. I used to live here, she said, her eyes darting to the windows. 12 years ago, I saw something. Something I should have told the police, but I was scared. Jaden leaned forward, his pulse pounding. What did you see? Claire swallowed, her hands twisting together. The day Aaliyah disappeared, I was walking my dog near the Thompsons' house. I saw a car, a dark sedan, parked in the alley behind their backyard. A man was in the driver's seat, just sitting there, watching. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later, when I heard about Aaliyah, I knew it was wrong. I wanted to tell someone, but my husband, he worked at the garage with Marcus Thompson, he told me to stay quiet. Said it wasn't our business. Jaden's breath caught. Marcus? Aaliyah's dad. Claire nodded, her face pale. My husband left town a week later. Never told me why. But I've always wondered, what if he knew something? Denise drove home, her mind a tangle of fear and suspicion. The receipt felt like a bomb in her purse, its implications too big to process. Marcus was already home, sitting in the living room, the TV casting flickering light across his face. Where you been? He asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Denise forced a smile, her heart hammering. Just running errands. She wanted to confront him, to hold up the locket and the receipt and demand answers, but Claire's words, "It's dangerous," echoed in her head. She didn't know who to trust anymore, not even the man she'd shared her life with. She excused herself to the kitchen, pretending to make tea, and pulled out her phone. She opened her blog, her fingers trembling as she typed a new post. Found something today. A receipt from the garage, from the week Aaliyah disappeared. Does anyone know about a dark sedan near her house back then? She hesitated, then hit publish. Within minutes, comments started rolling in, some dismissive, others urging her to go to the police. One stood out anonymous again. You're asking the right questions, but you're not safe. Jaden left the library in a daze, Claire's words ringing in his ears. She'd promised to meet him again, said she had more to tell but needed time to make sure it was safe. She'd given him a burner phone, a cheap flip phone with one number programmed in, hers. Only call if it's an emergency, she'd said, her voice tight. Jaden walked home, the phone heavy in his pocket, his mind racing. A dark sedan. A man at the garage. Marcus Thompson. It was too much too fast. He thought about Aaliyah, about the posters he'd seen as a kid, her bright smile frozen in time. He didn't know her, but he felt connected to her now, like that note had tied their lives together. When he got home, his mom was still at work, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the burner phone, wondering if he should call Claire now or wait. His phone buzzed, a new post on X about Aaliyah's case, linking to Denise's blog. He clicked it, his eyes widening as he read about the receipt, the dark sedan. It was the same car Claire had mentioned. Was this a coincidence, or was he caught in something bigger? Denise couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. The man in the hoodie, the anonymous comments, the receipt, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle she didn't want to solve but couldn't ignore. She started digging into Marcus's past, something she'd never done before. She found an old yearbook from his high school days, tucked away in a box in the garage. Flipping through it, she stopped at a photo of Marcus with a group of guys, one of them vaguely familiar. She squinted, her memory tugging at something, a man who'd worked at the garage, always quiet, always watching. His name was on the tip of her tongue. She grabbed her laptop and searched the garage's old employee records, something she'd never thought to do before. Most of the records were public, part of a business listing from years ago. There it was. Daniel Carter, mechanic, employed until 2 weeks after Aaliyah's disappearance. Her heart sank. Daniel, Claire's husband. Jaden, meanwhile, was wrestling with his own dilemma. He wanted to tell someone, Malik, his mom, even Mr. Carter, his history teacher, who'd mentioned the garage worker. But Claire's warning kept him silent. He started noticing things he hadn't before. Cars slowing down as they passed his house, a man lingering at the bus stop who didn't get on any bus. He told himself he was imagining it, but the burner phone in his pocket felt like a lifeline and a curse. At school, he overheard 2 teachers talking about Aaliyah's case, how Denise's blog was stirring things up again. One of them mentioned the police were looking into new tips, but they didn't sound hopeful. Jaden wanted to scream that he had a tip, that Claire knew something, but he kept his mouth shut. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched too, that whoever Claire was afraid of was close. Denise decided to visit the garage. She hadn't been there in years. Not since she'd stopped by to bring Marcus lunch during the search for Aaliyah. The place looked the same, oil-stained floors, the hum of machinery, the smell of gasoline. Marcus wasn't there, but his boss, an older man named Ray, greeted her with a tired smile. Denise, good to see you. Everything okay? She nodded, making small talk, her eyes scanning the walls, the bulletin board, anything that might hold a clue. She mentioned the receipt casually, saying she'd found it while cleaning. Ray's face changed, just for a second, before he shrugged. Lots of cars come through here. Don't remember any sedan specifically. But his voice was too tight, his eyes avoiding hers. She left feeling more uneasy than ever, the receipt burning a hole in her purse. On her way out, she noticed a photo on the wall, a group of mechanics, Marcus among them, and there in the corner was Daniel Carter, his face half-turned, like he didn't want to be seen. That night, Jaden got another text from Claire, library, tomorrow, 8 p.m. I have proof. His heart raced, a mix of excitement and dread. Proof of what? He wanted to ask, but the burner phone didn't let him reply. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Aaliyah, about Denise, about the dark sedan that seemed to tie everything together. Across town, Denise sat at her kitchen table, the locket and the receipt spread out in front of her. She'd found an old address for Daniel Carter in the records, a place just outside town. She didn't know what she'd do when she got there, but she had to go. She had to know. As she slipped the locket back into her purse, her phone buzzed again. Another blog comment. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like her." The words sent a chill down her spine, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she was this close. Jayden, too, felt the pull of the truth, the weight of the secrets he was carrying. Two paths, one driven by a mother's love, the other by a boy's courage, were racing toward a collision, and the answers they sought were closer and more dangerous than either could imagine. Denise's hands shook as she gripped the address scribbled on a scrap of paper. Daniel Carter's last known residence, a rundown house on the outskirts of town. The locket and the receipt were tucked in her purse, their weight heavier than ever. She hadn't told Marcus she was going. She couldn't, not with the doubts clawing at her. Last night, she'd caught him staring at her when he thought she wasn't looking, his eyes dark and unreadable. He'd asked about her day, his voice too casual, and when she mentioned the garage, his jaw tightened, just for a second. She'd brushed it off, but now, driving through the quiet streets, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. The anonymous comments on her blog had grown more urgent. "You're too close. Stop now," but she couldn't stop. Not when she was this close to answers about Aaliyah. The house came into view, its peeling paint and overgrown yard a stark contrast to the neat suburb she'd left behind. She parked a block away, her breath shallow, and checked her phone one last time. No new messages, just that chilling warning. She stepped out, the evening air cold against her skin, and started walking toward the house, every step feeling like a plunge into the unknown. Jayden's sneakers crunched against the gravel outside the library, the burner phone heavy in his pocket. Claire's text, "I have proof," had kept him up all night, his mind racing with questions. What kind of proof? And why was she so scared? He'd seen the fear in her eyes at their last meeting, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, like someone was watching. The library was almost empty now, the parking lot lit by a single flickering street lamp. Jayden checked the time, 7:55 p.m. He paced near the entrance, his nerves on edge, replaying Claire's story about the dark sedan, the man in the alley, her husband's sudden departure. It all pointed to the garage, to Marcus, to something Jayden couldn't quite piece together. He thought about Denise's blog, the receipt she'd mentioned, the sedan that matched Claire's description. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? As 8 p.m. hit, he saw a figure approaching, Claire, her coat pulled tight, a manila envelope clutched in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. "Jayden," she whispered, grabbing his arm. "We don't have much time. They know I'm here." Denise reached Daniel Carter's house, her heart hammering as she stood on the cracked sidewalk. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn, but a faint light flickered from the back of the house. She hesitated, her hand hovering over her phone. Should she call the police? Tell them what? Her suspicions? The locket? The receipt? It wasn't enough, not yet. She took a deep breath and crept closer, sticking to the shadows. The backyard was overgrown, weeds choking an old swing set that creaked in the wind. She froze when she heard a noise, a low murmur, voices coming from inside. She couldn't make out the words, but one voice sounded familiar, too familiar. Marcus? No, it couldn't be. Her mind raced, replaying every moment of the last 12 years. His late nights, his silence, the locket hidden in his shaving kit. She edged closer to a cracked window, peering through a gap in the curtains. Two men sat at a kitchen table, their faces lit by a dim lamp. One was older, grizzled, with a scar on his cheek. Daniel Carter. She was sure of it. The other man's back was to her, but his broad shoulders and the way he tilted his head sent a chill down her spine. It was Marcus. Inside the library, Claire pulled Jayden into a study room, shutting the door behind them. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope, pulling out a stack of papers and a grainy photo. "This is it," she said, her voice barely audible. "I kept it all these years, too scared to come forward." Jaden leaned closer, his eyes scanning the photo. It was the dark sedan, parked in an alley, a man leaning out the driver's window. The image was blurry, but the man's face was clear enough. Daniel Carter, Claire's husband. Jaden's stomach twisted. "This was taken the day Aaliyah disappeared?" he asked. Claire nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I took it with my old camera, just instinct. I didn't know what it meant until later." Daniel worked with Marcus at the garage. They were close, always whispering about something. After Aaliyah vanished, Daniel got paranoid, said we had to leave town. I didn't understand why until I found this. She slid a piece of paper across the table, a handwritten note, dated a week after Aaliyah's disappearance. It was from Daniel to Marcus. "It's done.
She's gone. Meet me at the usual spot."
Jaden's blood ran cold. "What does this mean?" he asked, though he was afraid he already knew. Denise's breath caught in her throat as she watched Marcus through the window. He was talking fast, his hands gesturing, while Daniel leaned back, his face hard. She couldn't hear everything, but snatches of their conversation drifted through the cracked window. "Can't keep this up? She's asking questions." The locket was a mistake. Her heart stopped. The locket. They were talking about Aaliyah. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stay still, to listen. Marcus's voice dropped lower, and she strained to catch the words. "If she finds out, it's over." Daniel laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You think she won't? She's already digging Marcus. That blog of hers. She's stirring things up." Denise's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. They knew about her blog. They knew she was close. She backed away from the window, her mind spinning. She needed to get out of there, to call the police, to do something. But as she turned, her foot caught on a root, and she stumbled, a branch snapping under her weight. The voices inside stopped. The back door creaked open. Jaden's hands shook as he held the note, Daniel's words staring up at him. "It's done.
She's gone."
He looked at Claire, her face etched with fear. "Why didn't you go to the police?" he asked, his voice sharper than he meant. Claire's eyes dropped to the table. "I was scared, Jaden. Daniel, he wasn't the man I married. He changed after Aaliyah disappeared, got mean, secretive. I thought he'd hurt me if I said anything. And then he left, and I tried to forget. But when I saw Denise's blog, saw she was still looking, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Jaden's mind raced. The note, the photo, the sedan, it all pointed to Daniel, and maybe Marcus. But what did they do? And where was Aaliyah now? Before he could ask, Claire's phone buzzed, and her face went white. "They're here," she whispered, grabbing the envelope. "Who?" Jaden asked, his heart pounding. Claire didn't answer. She just shoved the papers into his hands and pushed him toward the door. "Go, Jaden. Hide this. Don't let them find you." The urgency in her voice sent a jolt through him. He bolted out of the study room, the papers stuffed under his jacket, just as the library's front door swung open. Denise froze as the back door opened, her pulse thundering in her ears. Daniel stepped out, his eyes scanning the darkness. She pressed herself against the side of the house, her breath shallow, praying he wouldn't see her. "Who's there?" he called, his voice rough. She held her breath, her hand clutching the locket in her purse. Marcus appeared behind him, his silhouette unmistakable. "Probably just a raccoon," Marcus said, but his tone was tense, like he didn't believe it. Denise's mind screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She thought of Aaliyah, her bright smile, her purple sneakers, and the locket now in her hand. She couldn't leave, not when she was this close to the truth. Daniel took a step forward, his flashlight sweeping the yard, the beam inches from where she stood. Her heart felt like it would burst. Then her phone buzzed in her purse, loud in the silence. Daniel's had snapped toward the sound, and Marcus's voice cut through the night. "Someone's out there." Jaden sprinted through the library, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. He didn't know who they were, but Claire's panic was contagious. He ducked into the stacks, the envelope crinkling under his jacket. Footsteps echoed behind him, heavy, deliberate. He crouched behind a shelf, his breath ragged, and peeked through the gaps. Two men stood at the library entrance, their faces shadowed. One was tall, broad-shouldered, and Jaden's stomach dropped, Marcus Thompson. The other was older, with a scar on his cheek. Daniel Carter. Jaden's mind raced, connecting the dots. Claire's photo, the note, the sedan. They were here for the proof, for Claire, maybe for him. He clutched the envelope tighter, his heart pounding. Claire was nowhere in sight. She'd slipped out the back, he hoped. He needed to get out, to get the papers somewhere safe. But the men were moving through the library now, their voices low and urgent. "She's here somewhere," Daniel muttered. "And she's not alone." Denise's phone buzzed again, and she fumbled to silence it, her fingers clumsy with panic. The flashlight beam swung closer, and she bolted, her feet slipping on the damp grass. "There!" Daniel shouted, and she heard footsteps pounding behind her. She ran toward her car, her breath coming in gasps, the locket bouncing in her purse. She didn't dare look back, but she could feel them closing in. Marcus's voice called her name, sharp and desperate, and it broke something inside her. How could he do this? How could he know something about Aaliyah and keep it from her? She reached her car, fumbling with the keys, and threw herself inside, locking the doors. The engine roared to life, and she peeled out, her rear-view mirror catching a glimpse of Marcus and Daniel standing in the street, their faces grim. She didn't know where to go. Home wasn't safe, not anymore. She thought of the police, but what would she say? She needed proof, something more than a locket and a receipt. Her phone buzzed again, a new blog comment. "They're coming for you.
Get out now."
Jaden slipped out the library's side exit, his heart in his throat. The envelope was tucked under his jacket, the burner phone in his hand. He needed to call Claire to make sure she was safe, but the battery was dead. He cursed under his breath, ducking into an alley behind the library. The night was quiet, but he could still hear the men's voices inside, searching. He thought about Denise, about her blog, about the receipt she'd found. It all tied back to the garage, to Marcus, to Daniel. But what did it mean? Was Aaliyah still out there, or was this about something else, something darker? He started toward home, keeping to the shadows, but a car slowed as it passed, its headlights catching him for a moment. He froze, his pulse racing. The car didn't stop, but he recognized it, a dark sedan, just like the one in Claire's photo. He broke into a run, the envelope crinkling, the truth within it heavier than ever. Denise and Jaden were closer to the answers than they'd ever been, but the danger was closing in, and the next move would change everything. Denise's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she sped through the dark streets, the city lights blurring past her. The locket and receipt in her purse felt like ticking bombs, each one a piece of a puzzle she was terrified to complete. Marcus's voice calling her name back at Daniel's house echoed in her mind, laced with a desperation she'd never heard before. Her husband, the man she'd loved for over 20 years, was hiding something tied to Aaliyah's disappearance. The anonymous blog comment, "They're coming for you. Get out now," flashed in her head, urging her to keep moving. She didn't know where to go. Home wasn't safe, and the police would ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. Her phone buzzed again, another notification from her blog, but she didn't dare check it. Not now. She pulled into a gas station parking lot, the neon sign casting a sickly glow over her car. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she fumbled for her phone, her fingers hovering over 911. Then she saw it, a new text from an unknown number. "Check the locket. There's more inside." Her heart stopped. She hadn't even thought to open it. Jaden's sneakers pounded the pavement as he ran through the alley, the manila envelope under his jacket crinkling with every step. The dark sedan's headlights were burned into his memory, its slow crawl past him too deliberate to be a coincidence. He clutched the burner phone, cursing its dead battery, and thought of Claire's panicked face, her warning about them.
Who were they?
Marcus and Daniel, sure, but was there someone else? The papers in the envelope, Daniel's note, the photo of the sedan, felt like a lifeline and a noose. He needed to get them somewhere safe, but where? His mom's house was too risky. If someone was watching, they'd find him there. He thought of Denise, of her blog, of the receipt she'd posted about. She was searching for the same truth he was, but he didn't know how to reach her without putting them both in danger. His breath hitched as he heard an engine behind him, the low rumble of a car turning into the alley. He ducked behind a dumpster, his heart hammering, and peeked out. The dark sedan was back, idling at the alley's entrance, its driver hidden behind tinted windows. Denise's fingers shook as she pulled the locket from her purse, her eyes darting around the gas station lot. The neon lights flickered, casting shadows that made her jump. She hadn't opened the locket since Aaliyah was a little girl, too afraid of damaging the last piece of her daughter she had left. But the text, "There's more inside," was too specific, too urgent. She pried it open with her thumbnail, her breath catching as a tiny, folded piece of paper slipped out. It was worn, the edges frayed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Aaliyah's, her childish scrawl still vivid in Denise's memory. The note was short. "Mom, I'm okay. Don't trust him." Denise's vision blurred with tears, her chest tightening. Aaliyah had written this. She'd been alive, at least long enough to leave this message. But who was him? Marcus? Daniel? Someone else? The text from the unknown number buzzed again. "Meet me at the old mill, midnight. Bring the locket." Denise's blood ran cold. The old mill was abandoned, a crumbling relic on the edge of town. It was a trap. It had to be. But what if it was her only chance to find Aaliyah? Jaden pressed himself against the dumpster, the cold metal biting into his back. The sedan's engine cut off, and the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by a baseball cap. Jaden's heart sank. It was Marcus. He was alone, his footsteps slow and deliberate as he scanned the alley. Jaden held his breath, clutching the envelope, praying Marcus wouldn't see him. Then another figure appeared at the alley's mouth, Claire, her coat flapping as she ran toward Marcus. "You can't keep this up," she shouted, her voice raw with fear. "Denise is getting too close, and now that kid has the proof." Jaden's stomach dropped.
She was talking about him.
Marcus's voice was low, menacing. "You should have stayed gone, Claire. You're making this harder than it needs to be." Jaden's mind raced. Claire had betrayed him, led Marcus right to him.
But why?
He thought of the note in the envelope. It's done. She's gone, and a new fear gripped him. What if Aaliyah wasn't the only one they'd hurt? Denise sat in her car, the locket open in her lap, Aaliyah's note trembling in her hand. The words, "Don't trust him," felt like a knife to her heart. She wanted to believe it wasn't Marcus, that her husband couldn't be involved, but the evidence was piling up. The locket, the receipt, the conversation she'd overheard at Daniel's house, it all pointed to him. She checked the time, 10:30 p.m., an hour and a half until the meeting at the old mill. She didn't know who'd sent the text, but it was someone who knew about the locket, someone who knew Aaliyah. Her mind flashed to the anonymous blog comments, the warnings to stop digging. Whoever was behind this was watching her, maybe even now. She glanced in her rearview mirror, half expecting to see the dark sedan, but the lot was empty. She started the car, her hands steadying as a new resolve settled in. She'd go to the mill. For Aaliyah, she'd face whatever was waiting. Jaden's heart pounded as he listened to Claire and Marcus argue, their voices sharp in the quiet alley. "I didn't want this," Claire said, her voice breaking. "You and Daniel dragged me into it. I just want it to be over." Marcus stepped closer, his shadow looming over her. "It'll be over when I say it is. Where's the kid?" Jaden's blood froze. They were looking for him for the envelope. He needed to move, but his legs felt like lead. Then he heard it, a second car engine, approaching fast. Headlights swept the alley, and Marcus and Claire froze. The car stopped, and Daniel Carter stepped out, his scar glinting in the light. "Enough," he barked. "We end this tonight." Jaden's mind spun. And what? He thought of the photo, the note, Claire's fear. And then, a second twist hit him like a punch. Claire pulled a small, folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Daniel. "He has it," she said. "The kid. I gave it to him to keep him safe." Jaden's heart sank. The proof she'd given him was a decoy. The real evidence was in her hand, and she'd just betrayed him to save herself. Denise drove toward the old mill, the road growing rougher as the city gave way to overgrown fields. The mill loomed in the distance, its broken windows like empty eyes against the night sky. Her phone buzzed again, another text. Come alone. No police. Her stomach churned, but she kept driving, Aaliyah's note burning in her mind. Mom, I'm okay. Was it possible? Could her daughter still be out there after all these years? The thought gave her strength, but it was laced with fear. What if this was a setup? What if Marcus was waiting for her? She thought of his voice at Daniel's house, the way he'd said, if she finds out, it's over. She didn't know what it was, but she was about to find out. As she pulled into the mill's overgrown lot, she saw a single car parked near the entrance, a dark sedan. Her breath caught. It was the same car from the photo, from the receipt from Claire's story. She gripped the locket, her heart racing, and stepped out into the darkness. Jaden slipped out from behind the dumpster, his mind reeling. Claire had played him, given him fake evidence to keep him busy, while she handed the real proof to Daniel.
But why?
And what was the real proof? He crept along the alley's edge, staying low, as the three of them, Marcus, Claire, and Daniel, argued in hushed tones. The kid's not a problem, Daniel said, his voice cold. We'll find him. Get the papers back. Marcus's voice was tense. And Denise? She's not stopping. She found the locket. Daniel laughed, a cruel sound. Then we deal with her, too. Jaden's blood ran cold. They were talking about killing her. He needed to warn Denise, but he didn't know where she was. His eyes fell on Claire, who was backing away from the men, her face pale. For a split second, their eyes met, and he saw it. Guilt, fear, maybe regret. She mouthed one word. Run. Jaden didn't hesitate. He bolted, the envelope still under his jacket, his heart pounding as he heard footsteps behind him. Denise stood outside the mill, the sedan's dark shape looming in the shadows. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and rust. She clutched the locket, Aaliyah's note tucked inside, and took a step toward the mill's entrance. Her phone buzzed one last time, a final text. Inside.
Now.
She wanted to run, to call the police, to drive away and pretend none of this was happening. But Aaliyah's face flashed in her mind, her smile, her braids, her purple sneakers. Denise had failed her once, 12 years ago. She wouldn't fail her again. She pushed open the mill's rusted door, the creak echoing in the silence. Inside, the air was cold, the shadows deep. A single figure stood in the center of the room, their face hidden in the darkness. You brought the locket? The voice asked, low and unfamiliar. Denise's hand tightened around it, her voice steady despite her fear.
Who are you?
What do you know about my daughter? The figure stepped forward, and Denise's breath caught. It wasn't Marcus. It wasn't Daniel. It was someone she hadn't seen in 12 years, someone who was supposed to be gone. Jaden ran through the streets, his lungs burning, the envelope digging into his side. He could hear the sedan's engine behind him, its headlights cutting through the dark. He didn't know where to go. Home was too dangerous, and he didn't have Claire's number anymore. He thought of Denise, of her blog, of the mill she'd mentioned in her last post. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He veered toward the edge of town, his mind racing. Claire's betrayal stung, but her final warning, run, gave him a sliver of hope. Maybe she wasn't all bad. Maybe she was trapped, like him. The sedan was gaining, its engine roaring louder. Jaden ducked into another alley, his heart pounding, and pulled out the envelope. He tore it open, desperate for something real, something to help him. Inside was a second note, one he hadn't seen before, in Claire's handwriting. The mill. Midnight. Denise is in danger. His stomach dropped. He checked his watch, 11:45 p.m. He had to get there, had to warn her, before it was too late. The sedan's headlights swept the alley, and Jaden ran faster, the truth closer than ever, but the danger tighter than he could have imagined. Denise's heart pounded as she faced the figure in the mill, the locket clutched so tightly in her hand that its edges bit into her palm. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of mildew, the silence broken only by the distant drip of water. The figure stepped closer, their face catching the faint moonlight filtering through a broken window. It was Sarah, her old neighbor from 12 years ago, the one who'd lived next door when Aaliyah vanished. Sarah's hair was grayer now, her face lined with years of guilt, but Denise recognized her instantly. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You sent the text? You know what happened to Aaliyah?" Sarah's eyes were wet, her hands trembling as she nodded. "I'm so sorry, Denise. I've wanted to tell you for years, but I was scared. They threatened me, threatened my family." Denise's stomach twisted.
Who?
Marcus? Daniel? Sarah's gaze dropped, her voice barely audible. "It's bigger than them. It's about the garage, about what they were hiding." Before she could say more, the mill's door slammed open, and Marcus and Daniel stormed in, their faces hard with anger. Jaden's lungs burned as he sprinted toward the old mill, the sedan's headlights no longer behind him but still too close for comfort. The note from Claire, the mill. Midnight. "Denise is in danger," was crumpled in his hand, the envelope tucked under his jacket. His mind raced, piecing together everything. Claire's betrayal, the fake evidence, the real note she'd slipped him at the last second. She'd played both sides, trying to protect him while keeping herself safe. He didn't know if he could trust her, but he had to get to Denise. The mill loomed ahead, its rusted silhouette stark against the night sky. He heard voices, angry, urgent, coming from inside. He slowed, creeping toward a side window, his heart hammering. Through the grime-streaked glass, he saw Denise facing a woman he didn't recognize, and then Marcus and Daniel burst in, their presence filling the room with menace. Jaden's breath caught.
He was out of time.
Inside, Denise backed away as Marcus stepped toward her, his eyes wild. "Denise, why couldn't you just let it go?" he said, his voice thick with something that sounded like regret. Daniel stood behind him, his scar glinting in the dim light, a smirk on his face. "She's got the locket," Daniel said, nodding at Denise's hand. "And she's been asking too many questions." Sarah stepped between them, her voice shaking but firm. "It's over, Marcus. I can't keep quiet anymore.
I saw what happened that day.
I saw you and Daniel with Aaliyah." Denise's world tilted, her knees buckling. "What?" she whispered, her eyes locked on Marcus. You were there?" Marcus's face crumpled, his hands rising as if to reach for her, but she flinched away. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his voice breaking. "It was an accident. She saw something she shouldn't have, and we panicked." Sarah's voice cut through, sharp and raw. "It wasn't an accident, Marcus. You and Daniel were running drugs through the garage, hiding them in cars. Aaliyah saw you loading that sedan in the alley. She was just a kid, curious, but you couldn't risk her talking." Denise's vision blurred with tears, her breath coming in gasps. "You took her? My baby? Where is she?" Marcus's eyes filled with tears, but Daniel laughed, cold and cruel.
"She's gone, Denise."
"Long gone. You think we'd let a kid ruin everything?" Sarah shook her head, stepping forward. "That's not true. I saw her after that day, Marcus. You didn't hurt her. You gave her to someone, didn't you?" The room went still, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Denise's heart surged with a desperate hope. "She's alive," she whispered, clutching the locket, Aaliyah's note, "Mom, I'm okay," burning in her mind. Jaden, crouched outside, heard every word, his blood running cold. Aaliyah was alive? He fumbled with the envelope, pulling out the papers Claire had given him. The note, "It's done. She's gone," had seemed so final, but Sarah's words suggested something else. He scanned the other papers, his eyes landing on a faded document, a transfer record, dated a week after Aaliyah's disappearance. It listed a girl, unnamed, moved to a foster home in another state, arranged through a private agency. His heart raced. Could it be her? He needed to get inside, to tell Denise, but Daniel's voice cut through his thoughts. "Enough of this," Daniel snapped, pulling a knife from his pocket. "We end it now, her the neighbor, all of it. Jaden's stomach dropped. He couldn't wait any longer. He burst through the side door, the envelope in his hand, shouting, "Denise! She's alive! I have proof!" The room froze as Jaden's voice echoed, all eyes turning to him. Denise's face lit up with hope, but Daniel lunged, his knife gleaming. Marcus grabbed his arm, shouting, "No, Daniel. Stop." The two men struggled, the knife clattering to the floor as Sarah pulled Denise back. Jaden held up the papers, his voice shaking but steady. "It's a transfer record. A girl, sent to a foster home. It has to be Aaliyah." Denise's tears spilled over, her hands trembling as she reached for the papers.
Where?
"Where is she?" she asked, her voice raw. Jaden handed her the document, his eyes locked on Daniel, who was shoving Marcus away, his face twisted with rage. "You're all dead," Daniel snarled, reaching for the knife again. But before he could move, police sirens wailed in the distance, their lights flashing through the mill's broken windows. Claire had called them. Jaden realized, her final act of redemption after years of silence. As the police stormed in, Daniel tried to run, but officers tackled him to the ground. Marcus sank to his knees, his head in his hands, sobbing. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, his voice broken. "I thought I was protecting her." Denise clutched the transfer record, her eyes scanning the details. A foster home in Ohio, a girl matching Aaliyah's description. She turned to Marcus, her voice trembling with rage and hope. "You gave her away?
To who?
Why?" Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. "It was the only way to keep her safe," he whispered. "The people we worked for, they would have killed her if she stayed." Denise shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You let me think she was gone. You let me die inside." The police cuffed Marcus, pulling him to his feet, but Denise barely noticed. She held the locket, Aaliyah's note, and the transfer record, her heart torn between fury and the fragile hope that her daughter was out there, alive. But then came the final twist, a revelation that turned hope into dread. As the police led Daniel and Marcus away, Sarah approached Denise, her face pale. "There's something else," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't want to tell you until I was sure, but the agency that took Aaliyah, it wasn't just a foster home. It was connected to the same people Marcus and Daniel worked for. They didn't just hide her, they used her." Denise's knees buckled, her vision swimming. Used her? For what? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know everything, but I heard rumors. Kids moved through their network, used as couriers, kept off the grid. Aaliyah might be alive, but she's not free." Jaden, standing nearby, felt his stomach lurch. The transfer record in Denise's hand wasn't a lifeline, it was a map to a new nightmare. Denise's voice was a whisper, fierce and unbroken. "I'll find her, no matter what it takes." The police lights flashed, the mill's shadows deepening, but the story wasn't over. Aaliyah was out there, caught in a web far darker than anyone had imagined, and Denise and Jaden were only beginning their fight to bring her home. The police lights cast a red and blue glow over the old mill, their sirens fading into the night as Denise stood frozen, the transfer record trembling in her hands. Sarah's words, "They used her," echoed in her mind, a fresh wound on top of 12 years of grief. Aaliyah might be alive, but she was caught in something darker, something Denise couldn't yet comprehend. Jaden stood beside her, his young face etched with a mix of fear and determination, the envelope still clutched under his jacket. The police had taken Marcus and Daniel away, their confessions spilling out in the chaos, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Denise's eyes burned with tears, but her voice was steady as she turned to Jaden. "You said you have proof. Show me everything." He nodded, his hands shaking as he pulled out the papers Claire had given him. The transfer record was the key, a thin thread leading to a foster home in Ohio, but Sarah's warning suggested it was more than that. Denise's heart clung to the hope in Aaliyah's note. "Mom, I'm okay," but the fear of what her daughter had been through threatened to drown her. She looked at Jaden, a boy she didn't know but who'd risked everything to help her. "We're going to find her," she said, her voice fierce.
together.
The next morning, Denise sat at a diner across from the police station, Jaden beside her, the transfer record and locket spread out on the table. The police had taken her statement, but their faces were grim when she mentioned the foster agency. "We'll look into it," the detective had said, but Denise could tell they didn't expect much. The agency was a ghost, its records murky, tied to a network that operated in the shadows. She'd spent the night on the phone with a private investigator, a woman named Carla who'd seen her blog and offered to help. Carla had a reputation for finding people the police couldn't, and she was already digging into the Ohio lead. Jaden sipped his coffee, his eyes tired but alert. He'd told his mom everything about the note from Claire, the chase in the alley, the truth about the garage. His mom had been furious, then proud, hugging him so tight he could barely breathe. "You're not doing this alone anymore," she'd said, and now she was on her way to meet them, determined to help. Denise looked at Jaden, grateful for his courage. "Why'd you do it?" she asked. "You didn't have to get involved." Jaden shrugged, a shy smile breaking through. "I don't know. That note, it felt like she was asking me to help, like it was meant to be." Carla arrived at the diner an hour later, her laptop open and her face grim. "This agency," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "It's a front. They move kids, mostly runaways or ones with no family, through a network for illegal jobs, couriers mostly, sometimes worse. The records are a mess, but I found a trail. A girl matching Aaliyah's description was placed in a home in Columbus, Ohio, 12 years ago. After that, she was moved again multiple times. Last record puts her in Chicago, 3 years ago." Denise's heart raced, hope and fear battling inside her. "Chicago," she whispered. Carla nodded. "It's not much, but it's a start. I've got contacts there. Who can help? But, Denise, you need to be ready. She might not be the same girl you remember." Denise clutched the locket, Aaliyah's note inside. "She's my daughter. I'll find her, no matter what." Jaden, listening quietly, felt a surge of determination. He didn't know Aaliyah, but he knew what it was like to feel lost, to need someone to fight for you. "I'm coming too," he said, surprising even himself. Carla raised an eyebrow, but Denise just nodded. "Okay," she said. "Let's do this." The drive to Chicago was long, the miles stretching out under a gray sky. Denise and Jaden barely spoke, each lost in their thoughts. Denise kept the locket in her pocket, her fingers brushing against it for comfort. She thought of Marcus, now in custody, his confessions spilling out in fragments. He and Daniel had been small players in a drug ring, using the garage to hide shipments in cars. Aaliyah had stumbled into the alley that day, seen something she shouldn't have, a deal going down, a bag of cash changing hands. Marcus swore he'd never meant to hurt her. He'd panicked, handed her to a contact in the network to keep her quiet, thinking she'd be safe in a new life. But Denise couldn't forgive him. He'd let her grieve for 12 years, let her believe Aaliyah was gone. Jaden, meanwhile, thought of Claire, who'd vanished after calling the police. He'd seen a post on X about her, a vague mention of a woman turning herself in, but no details. He hoped she was okay, that her guilt had finally pushed her to do the right thing. The burner phone was still in his pocket, a reminder of how one small act, giving up his seat, had pulled him into this. In Chicago, Carla led them to a rundown apartment building in a neighborhood where the air smelled of asphalt and fast food. Her contact, a former social worker named Malik, had tracked down a lead, a woman in her early 20s, going by the name Lila, who matched Aaliyah's description. "She's been in and out of the system," Malik said, leading them up a creaky staircase. "Works odd jobs, keeps to herself. Don't get your hopes up, she might not want to be found." Denise's heart pounded as they reached the door. She knocked, her breath held, and when it opened, her world stopped. The young woman standing there had Aaliyah's eyes, her cheekbones, the same tilt of her head. But her face was harder, her hair cropped short, her expression guarded. "Who are you?" Lila asked, her voice sharp. Denise's voice broke as she held up the locket.
"Aaliyah?"
"It's me. It's Mom." The woman's eyes widened, then narrowed, a flicker of recognition buried under years of pain. "You've got the wrong person," she said, starting to close the door, but Denise stepped forward, tears streaming down her face.
Please.
"I've been looking for you for 12 years. Jaden watched, his heart in his throat, as Denise pleaded with the woman who might be Aaliyah. He saw the fear in her eyes, the way she clutched the doorframe like she might run. Malik stepped in, his voice calm. "Lila, just hear her out. She's got proof, a note you wrote, a locket you wore." Lila's gaze flicked to the locket, and for a moment, her guard slipped. She took it, her fingers trembling as she opened it, revealing the note. "Mom, I'm okay. Don't trust him." Her eyes filled with tears, and she sank onto a chair, her voice barely a whisper. "I wrote this a long time ago. I thought you'd forgotten me." Denise fell to her knees, sobbing, reaching for her daughter's hand.
Never.
"I never stopped looking." Aaliyah, hesitated, then let Denise hold her, their tears mingling as 12 years of pain began to unravel. Jaden turned away, his own eyes stinging, feeling like he'd witnessed something sacred. The truth came out in pieces over the next hours. Aaliyah had been moved through the network, shuffled from one foster home to another, used as a courier for small deliveries, nothing dangerous at first, just packages she didn't understand. She'd been too young to fight back, too scared to run. Over time, she'd built a new life, a new name, burying her past to survive. But she'd never forgotten her mom, never stopped hoping. The locket, slipped into Marcus's things by a contact to keep it safe, was her last connection to home. Denise listened, her heart breaking and healing all at once. She told Aaliyah everything about the search, the blog, the locket, Jaden's help. Aaliyah's eyes softened as she looked at Jaden. "You're the kid from the bus," she said, a small smile breaking through. "Claire told me about you, how you helped her." Jaden's jaw dropped. "You know Claire?" Aaliyah nodded. "She was my caseworker for a while before I ran. She tried to help, but she was scared too." Back in town, the police were unraveling the network. Marcus and Daniel's confessions led to raids on the garage and other fronts, exposing a web of corruption that stretched across state lines. Claire had turned herself in, her testimony filling in gaps, how she'd been coerced into silence, how she'd slipped Jaden the note to give him a chance to help. She faced charges but was cooperating, her guilt driving her to make amends. Denise and Aaliyah stayed in Chicago for weeks, rebuilding their bond, piece by painful piece. Denise rented a small apartment, and Jaden's mom sent him care packages, proud of his courage but insisting he focus on school. Jaden visited when he could, bringing Aaliyah mixtapes and stories about their town, helping her remember the good parts of her past. One day, as they sat in a park, Aaliyah opened the locket again, her fingers tracing the purple stone. "I used to dream you'd find me," she said, her voice soft. Denise squeezed her hand. "I never stopped dreaming of you." The final twist came quietly, almost unnoticed, but it left a mark. As Denise and Aaliyah packed to return home, Carla called with news. The network wasn't just about drugs. It was tied to a larger operation, one that used kids like Aaliyah to move sensitive information, encrypted files hidden in everyday deliveries. One of those files, Carla said, was still out there, and Aaliyah might know where it was. "I was just a kid," Aaliyah said, her voice trembling. "They gave me a package once, told me to hide it. I buried it under a tree in one of the foster homes." Denise's heart raced. The truth wasn't over. It was still unfolding, and Aaliyah held the key to something bigger. They decided to leave it for now, to focus on healing, but Denise knew they'd have to face it someday. For now, she had her daughter back, and that was enough. The story ended not with a bang, but with a quiet hope. Denise and Aaliyah returned to their town, moving into a new house, leaving the old one behind with its ghosts. Jaden went back to school, his act of kindness on that bus forever changing his life. He and Aaliyah stayed friends, their bond forged in the fire of that night at the mill. Denise's blog became a place of healing, where she shared their story, inspiring others to keep searching, to never give up. The locket stayed with Aaliyah, a reminder of her strength, her survival. The key takeaway? Love and courage can break through even the darkest secrets, but the truth often comes at a cost. For Denise, it was years of grief. For Jaden, it was stepping into a danger he never imagined. For Aaliyah, it was a childhood lost. But together, they proved that hope can light the way, even when the path is shrouded in mystery. As the credits roll on the story, picture Denise and Aaliyah sitting on their new porch, the locket glinting in the sunlight, Jaden tossing a basketball nearby. The past isn't gone. It's in every scar, every tear, but they're building a future, one day at a time. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of Chicago, a tree holds a secret, waiting for the day someone dares to dig. That's the beauty of the story. It's about loss, betrayal, and redemption, but it's also about the courage to keep going, to find light in the darkest places. Stick with us for more stories that pull you in and leave you thinking, because the truth is always worth chasing.